Hello, I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and you are watching Tom Talks Rubbish. It's the place for interviews, wrestling reviews, and so much more.
Sure, you subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish. I highly recommend you subscribe here first.
Yeah, man, I'm ready. Let's go.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, and today I'm back with another interview. This time, I'm joined by Cassidy Haynes from bodyslam.net. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Just to peel back the curtain, guys, as some of you would have seen, this is why this interview probably has taken a bit longer to record than others, because I've had so many mic issues lately.
Yeah, it's all right, man. Yeah, we figured it out. I thought it was on my end, but we got it worked out now. For at least we can get this one going.
As I say,
I had mic issues too, so I was like, "Oh no, it's doing it again." So yeah, we both were having to figure out who had the problem. So
it's me. Unfortunately, as much as I love this microphone, it can be very temperamental. So if we take this back to the beginning, before your time in slam.net, before your time in the wrestling media, where does Cassidy Haynes, the wrestling fan, start?
Well, actually, so I've been doing wrestling media and news since I was a teenager. So that was like 1998, 97. So I was like 14, 15 years old when I started. So technically I've been doing this forever, but I used a pen name for a long time just because, high school, didn't want my name out there. Back in the 90s, it wasn't as cool as like wrestling as it is now. It wasn't as accepted. So, it was whatever. But I've been doing this forever. I became a fan of wrestling probably I was 5 years old. I was being babysat by my great grandmother one night, and WCW Clash of the Champions was the first one, was on TBS, and she just happened it on. She loved wrestling, so she had it on, and I happened to be there. And Sting and Flair's first match in the main event there was the one that got me. So I was hooked after that. Actually was a Ric Flair fan more than I was a Sting fan, which was funny as a kid because you would think that the kid would be pulling for the good guy with the face paint, but I was like, I like the bad guy. But yeah, been hooked ever since. WCW in the 80s was my thing, so I've been a fan ever since.
For people of my generation that may not know, we're talking about Surfer Sting at this point, right?
Yeah, at this point it was he had a rat tail and spiked hair and bright colored face paint. So it's 88. Yeah. He didn't become the Crow Sting until 96. So yeah, this is a long time before that.
Yep. So if we then continue,
this Sting, right?
Oh
here.
wow!
Yeah, that guy.
Just to peel the curtain back, guys, that was not prepped whatsoever. So I was not prepared for that whatsoever.
Oh, I got a big version of. Dude, I got all my toys, man. I got bam. So this Sting right here, this guy basically was the one that got me into wrestling.
So
I was always interested back then. That's what got me like kind of hooked. But I was a little more interested because my dad apparently, when I was a kid, told me that he lived across the street from the Armstrong family when he was a child. So my dad was friends with Brad Armstrong, and all of that until he was like 10, 12 years old, till they went to different schools, they redistrict and stuff. So my dad had pictures of him playing baseball with Brad Armstrong and tons of stuff like that. So I was like, okay, cool. So I got like super into wrestling just because I had like, my dad knew a guy. So when I would see Brad Armstrong on TV, I'd be like, oh, that's my dad's friend when he was a kid. So I was all in as I was a little dude. Most of these toys are my old toys when I was a kid still. So
that's actually really cool. So as your in was WCW, where does WWF come in your journey?
I watched it. It was always, on. I'd see Saturday mornings with on USA and Saturday Night Main Event. So I was aware of the other product because I just started watching all the wrestling I could find when I was little, and even to the point when I would go to Atlanta to visit my family, because that's where my family's from. They're from the Atlanta area. So when I was really little, I'd go down there and stay with them. And there was this one TV station that for whatever reason on Saturday night, they did nothing but run wrestling. So it was like a one of the local stations, you had to go on the cable with
Yeah.
the rabbit ear antenna and stuff like that. But it'd be nothing but like local stuff and every wrestling thing. So I was just any wrestling I could find, I would watch. I would look through the newspaper and mark off like where it's on and what channel and make sure I could find it. So, but WCW came to my area. They always came through the Asheville Civic Center here in North Carolina where I lived. And but WWF never really did. So I mean, I would watch it, but I didn't really get as much into that product because I never could go see it live in person. Like the closest they ever came was in the late 90s, I think, to like Greensboro and Charlotte and Raleigh, but that's 5-6 hours, 3, 4, 5 hours from me most of the time. So
one
different.
Yeah, I fully understand it. So one thing I'm really curious to know about is if we look at the contrast between WCW in the 80s and WWE in the 80s, where I keep wanting to say AEW, but that is not right. We're not quite there in the story.
Not there yet, no.
When we compare WWF at the time to WCW, with WCW being more, I don't want to say realism based, but like Ric Flair's fighting almost the common man.
Whereas you didn't have as many characters in WCW as you did in WWF at the time. They were more, it was more over the top, like exaggerated characters, and WCW was more, like you said, your blue collar, real human people instead of like, the Mountie. And stuff like that, again, characters you had, but they eventually went that way too. Not WCW did in the early 90s. So they went that way. And then of course changed to the NWO stuff, kind of changed everything, but there was touches of it. WCW had some ridiculous characters too when I was a kid, but for the most part, it was more or less not what I was on TV that made me more of a fan of WCW. Is just, like I said, that they would come through my area. I could go see house shows like once every couple months, and they ran pay-per-views here, and like WCW Clash of the Champions was the first live event I ever went to. It was in 1990, and it was like Clash of the Champions Fall Brawl from the Asheville Civic Center. And it was Sting versus the Black Scorpion when that angle was going on. So that was my first ever live show. So that that was really what hooked me with WCW as a kid, was just the fact that I could go to it when I couldn't do that with WWF.
So if you at this time are seeing more WCW, what is it that you from those, do you have a memory from those house shows that you're like, oh, I remember that, and you always look back upon?
Yeah, WCW was cool because there was always this old lady. She was, super old when I was a kid. So she was like in her 70s, 80s, maybe even older than that. But she was always giving Ric Flair a hard time. She was always running up to the front row, giving him the finger. And they were always back and forth, having like Flair would scream at her. She would scream at him. But they always incorporated her into the show. And she was there every show from my entire, childhood. She was always there. And then I guess she eventually passed away. And when they did, WCW like put the seat, they had an empty seat for her at the front row, and they did a 10-bell salute for her before the show and talked about like how much they was going to miss not having her at the Asheville Civic Center, because she'd been at every single show since since the 50s or 60s that had been going through there. So like every wrestler knew who she was. So when I was a kid, it was just, house shows were awesome for like reasons like that. You would see stuff like you just wouldn't see on TV. You see old ladies like hitting Ric Flair with their purse and like just all stuff like that. Yeah.
Do you think that because of the age we live in now, with social media and wrestlers maybe acting more shooting themselves on social media, do you think there's a lost art almost into being a heel?
Yeah, it's totally different now than it. Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's no more. So if social media was around in those days, there's no telling how things would have been. But yeah, I mean, MJF's the only real example of pretty much staying in character all the time, which is what they used to do, So yeah, I mean, it's definitely different because, I mean, you got somebody that's a bad guy on TV, then you go see him on Twitter being like nice to people, so it's like, MJF doesn't do that. So he's one of the only ones now that stays in character all the time. And I think that's a lost art, like you were saying, of masterful heel work, is to like not let people see behind the curtain and see who you really are. But MJF's a good guy. He's an awesome guy. I've actually seen him a couple of times, not like in character, and he's a cool dude. But he's probably the best. I say he's the best at it, and he's a throwback to the old school heel style where he's never out of character, hardly ever. So
it would either be him or, for me personally, either him or Ciampa from like 2016, 2017 era NXT.
Yeah. Yep, I agree with you there.
So if we continue along your wrestling journey, we're going sort of into the early 90s now. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, by the way. Sort of early 90s. So are you still on the same trajectory of I'm a diehard WCW fan and I'm not really checking out WWE at this point?
I checked it out. I was watching everything. Like I was saying, like even when WCW, I was a huge WCW fan, like diehard, but I would watch WWE. I would watch Superstars on Saturday morning, or I'd watch Saturday Night Main Event or whatever they had, but it just wasn't, like I said, I didn't have as much of a connection to the characters, but I watched it all, and I watched Raw when it first started. You know what I mean? So for every Monday night, like I would watch everything that I could watch, but I was more, I know my WCW history a lot more than I know my WWF. But like so early '90s, I got to go to like I said, some Clash of the Champions there at the Civic Center when I was a kid. But I went to like Super Brawl 3, so I got to see the Sting and Vader strap match front row. Yeah, so I was like stuff like that. WWF never came around, but it didn't mean I didn't watch it. It just, those are my guys because I get to see Sting, I get to see Vader, I get to see these guys. But
I
didn't shine away from any of it. You know what I mean? Like when I was a kid, like that was my I like all sports. I watched baseball, like football, like everything. Basketball, it didn't matter. I played all sports when I was a kid. I was anything athletic, I was absorbing it and taking it in. But wrestling, it didn't matter what it was. I'm the same way now. I don't really hate one product. I mean, I don't enjoy some as much as the others, but when I was a kid, I liked everything. I soaked it all up. So, I mean, I don't know if you can see, like over here's my Hasbro figures. So like I had my ring. I even got my big JLN. I got my big ones. I've got like the 80s figures with, like Jesse Ventura right there and Bruno and the Sheik and Junkyard Dog. So I definitely didn't prefer one over the other. I watched everything, but as far as like who I got into WCW more just because, like I said, they were more. It was in my face. It was in my face.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
They were more in your area at that time with the way cable was.
Yeah, it was territorial still at the time, and I'm in the South, so you know what I mean. Like they were running here all the time. Like it was all over the place, and back then WWF stayed mostly in the Northeast, other than when they kind of in the mid '90s they opened up and were running all over the place. But for the most part, they didn't come to the South. That was WCW's area. So
if we move forward to like the Monday Night Wars time, have you had a break since then, or not really?
No, I was at Fall Brawl '95, so right before the NWO showed up. I was at that pay-per-view. So that was Dungeon of Doom versus like Hogan, Sting, Savage. I think it was supposed to be Vader, but Vader had gotten in a fight with Paul Orndorff and got the shit out of him, so he quit. So that's I was at that pay-per-view as a kid, and that was when the Giant debuted. It was funny, that pay-per-view was really cool. So I was 12 years old for that one, and I remember walking around beforehand, and they were like, "Hey kid, you want to come be a part of a little thing we're shooting?" I was like, "All right." My mom said go and do it. So I go outside, and it's the segment where Hulk Hogan's outside with his motorcycle, and then all of a sudden the Giant shows up and runs over with the monster truck. Little me is in that segment, but I'm like, you can only see like half my shoulder.
Oh wow!
It was all frame. It wasn't widescreen at the time. You know what I mean? Like now they've got, like, they would be able to get everybody in, but at the time it was small frame, so they couldn't get the entire shot. But you can see like half my shoulder and my head. So like I was all in. I'd go to anything I could go see in the night. It didn't stop really until I guess I went to college. So probably like early 2000s is when I took a break. So I didn't take a break from wrestling until like 2000. Honestly, when WCW got bought and disappeared, that's kind of when that's when I graduated too. I graduated in 2001 and went to college, so that kind of, it took a 3-4 year lull until I got back home. So that was really my only downtime, was when I was in school from like early 2000s.
Cool. So we've skipped ahead a bit in your wrestling journey.
Yeah, we'll jump back because the Monday Night Wars is what got me into wrestling journalism. So
at the time, wrestling journalism is obviously a lot more.
It's different at the time. Yeah, at the time it's
different.
all magazines, and the internet was just starting. You got to
Mm,
think about that too. So there was still like, websites really hadn't been established yet. Like there weren't, and it was still the Wild West out there as far as places to get your wrestling news from, and there really weren't standards too. So people would be, there would be just bullshit made up all the time. It was really different back in the '90s as far as like the way things are now. But yeah, I wrote for all those sites when I was a kid. So when I'm in like, I guess Monday Night Wars are really kicking off, and that's when the internet's blowing up too. So that's when you're going to dirt sheets all the time, trying to see who's going to jump ship, who's going to be where at night, and you're trying to read your news all the time. And I just started writing as a kid, like aggregating other people's news, which is what people still do. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I wrote for sites all the time back in the '90s when I got out of school in the afternoon. I finished my homework or whatever. I would do wrestling news until I passed out at night, and then start the next day. So yeah, that's really what got me into it, was that. And I remember being, what grade I was in, probably 11th grade, and I'm sitting in one of my classes, probably second or third period, and this kid, a buddy of mine too, sitting next to me. He's like, "Hey man," he leans over and taps me on the shoulders, like, "Have I been reading my wrestling news from you?" And for some reason, like panic washed over me. I'm like, "Oh
Mm.
shit." It's like my identity's been discovered. I was like, "What do you maybe why?" And I was like, "What'd you read and where?" And he starts telling me, and I'm like, "Oh fuck, that is me." I'm like, "Yeah, man, maybe, yeah, shit." And he was like, "Oh, that's cool." And I'm like, "Is it though?" And at that point, I'm like, I don't want anybody to know that's what I do with my spare time. So I went home,
Mm.
honestly went home and sold my websites, and I kept writing, but I went under a pen name from then on out. I was like, Cassidy Haynes was no longer on my news until way later, probably 2008 again. So I took like, yeah, about 9 years off of I went into hiding, but I still was there, but I was just writing under a fake name. But yeah, I don't know
If
why. I don't know why I freaked out, man. It made no sense. You know what I mean? Like I was like, "Oh, well, people gonna make fun of me or something?" Like, you're reading it. Like, what am I worried about? But at the same time, I was like, "Oh, that's just one thing in high school." I was like, you don't want. It wasn't cool like it is now, man. And it was different in the '90s, man, in the early, like late '90s. So I was just like, yeah, I got out. I don't know why I got scared when my identity got discovered. I guess I got too big at the time because he was reading me on some pretty big sites. So I was like, oh no, I got
yeah.
to get out of here. But yeah, that's the '90s for me. Basically, it's Monday Night Wars, writing news, and then my identity being discovered and me freaking out and just disappearing for a while.
So there's a lot to unpack in that, if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, go
Uh,
for it, man.
so you talk about obviously being scared and people discovering you, and I think there's something that people can relate to
Yeah,
in the modern day, because like with me doing my YouTube channel, I'm still at the point where like I'm slowly starting to get messages that I'm sure you get, like
bullies all the time, man. Bullies, man. It's
no no no
bullshit.
no 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 no, not
I
so
get
much.
cyberbullied still for my channel. Even the stuff
Oh
I do
really?
today. Yeah, even today for like my chops videos and stuff. Like people, I'm like, are we in middle school, guys? Like, are you really
Hmm.
gonna be making fun of me? But like, that's what I was at in high school. I was like, oh, I'm gonna get made fun of for doing wrestling news. So I like, ghosted myself and put my name not on anything anymore. But no, go ahead. Like you were saying with your channel,
Hmm.
you get.
No, no, I'm starting to get not so much bullied, but like nice messages, and like I'm still at the stage where it's like people watch my stuff.
Yeah.
Like, do you think with the internet being the way it is now, if you were in high school and that happened, you may have got a
Oh,
lot
things are
bigger,
totally
a
different.
lot quicker, shall we say?
Oh yeah, it's totally. And now it's like it'd be all right because if you have any type of internet fame in any way, you're like you're looked at differently now too. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
he's a TikTok star. He's got a lot of followers, or he's got a lot. It'd be totally different. You know what I mean? But there was no social media or whatever, so it would be just like, back then, like in high school, people would get picked on for wearing wrestling shirts where I lived. You know what I mean? So it's
Hmm.
like I really want to like bring that bullseye upon myself as far as being bull. Yeah, I mean, dude, I'm wearing a Mick Foley shirt underneath this one. So I mean, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, but back then it was different. You know what I mean? Like I remember even when kids would wear NWO shirts, like even though that was the coolest shit going at the time, like there were still like people that would make fun of them and stuff like that. So I remember just being like, that's just one thing I don't want to deal with. And that's why I'm real big now. Like I don't like people bullying people online for liking wrestling, because
Hmm.
it took me, because that's kind of the thing I went through is I was like, well, I don't want to get picked on for that. Like high school is hard enough as it is. Like the last thing I want to do is just add more ammo to get made fun of. So yeah, when my buddy noted, when I got discovered, I was like, yep, that's it. I'm done. So no, I social media is different now. Like that stuff wasn't around back then. So like, you'd be viewed different. Like you said, like today, if somebody that has like a bunch of followers on whatever, because of whatever reason, it's looked at differently than it is back then, as being just like, you can't prove you've got a following. You know what I mean? Like, oh, he might be kind of popular, but back then it was just like, oh, dub nerd. So I was just like, yeah.
You talk about as well being a lot more comfortable being discovered now. If you somehow we discovered time machines or something, and you could go back to that day where your friend discovered you and say something to yourself, then what would you say?
To not be an idiot and be like, why are you worried about something like this? Obviously, because that's the thing is like, I always wonder, like, man, where would I have been in this wrestling news career if I hadn't like freaked out when I was 17 years old that somebody was going to make fun of me in science class because I wrote wrestling news at night. Like, it's stupid to think back now, but it definitely, like, I mean, probably delayed my career 15 years, at least, because like I didn't start back up again until like 2008 doing it for other sites with my name on it, and then didn't really like start catching any with Body Slam until 2017, 2018. You know what I mean? So I took another 10 years before I got to this point. So I mean, there's no telling what. I mean, I would be probably a lot more prominent and a lot more known and a lot bigger in this little niche of wrestling news if I hadn't, freaked out and worried about what people thought, other than like, which I didn't even know what people thought. I was just preemptively like taking
I don't want to know what people think, so
I don't want it to be bad, so I'd rather not be anything. So I just, it's stupid. I would tell myself to be comfortable in who you are, and that's like, you enjoy wrestling. Who cares if people don't like it? Like what you like. Don't let anybody else, the whole steal your sunshine, or steal your joy, or soak up what you like. Man, I get so mad at people making fun like that. That CM Punk fan that was crying and how people were attacking him online, that infuriated me to no end, because like, why would somebody want to like make somebody not enjoy something like that anymore? And it just reminds me of that when I was in high school. It all just clicks with me. It's like, man, I don't want him to feel the way that I felt and be worried about like, you know what I mean? Like,
definitely.
I don't like it at all. So yeah, no, I'm a big supporter, and like, if I could go back and tell myself anything, it'd be like, who gives a shit what anybody else thinks, man? Do you enjoy it? Do you like it? Are you making money? Because I was making the money. That was another thing too, is I was making money when I was at high school doing wrestling news. Why would I have stopped? I don't even understand it. But yeah, I'll just go ahead and tell myself to be comfortable with who I am and not worry about it. And I definitely think it would have been a whole lot better for me.
It's a double-edged sword though, because you can't be comfortable with who you are until you learn these things, but you also need to learn these things to be comfortable with who you are, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I don't, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't understand why I was worried about what somebody would think when this person's reading my news. So it's like, are you going to make fun of me for, you sought it out? Like, technically, like, you were looking it up and reading it in the first place. So why would I care? Why would I be worried about you knowing that my name's on it? But that's just, I don't know. That was just how I was back then, man. I don't know why I freaked out, but I did. And it definitely probably would have, I probably would have stayed on a different path. You know what I mean? I don't know where I would have been at or what I would have done, but at the same time too, like, things worked out the way they did too. Like, me doing what I did and quitting and not doing wrestling for a while got me out of it. And then when I decided to get back into it, it was a little different. And that's how I met a lot of the people that I met. Because like, when I decided I'm going to start writing wrestling news again, it was weird. It was, I was still watching it. That was the thing. I never stopped watching it. I just,
you said 2001 to
I would still
2005.
I would still watch it some, but it wasn't like I planned my day around it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, Monday night, if something more important was going on, I would go out and do it. You know what I mean? Like, if I wanted to go out and get drinks, I was going out. Because I actually lived in Tennessee in that time period, like in the mid 2000s. So like, I went when I was 21 to 23, I was going to University of Knoxville, and that's when TNA was going on in Nashville. So a couple of nights a week, or like on Wednesday nights or whatever night it was, a couple of my buddies, we would load up every now and then and drive to Nashville every now and then. So it wasn't like I got out of wrestling completely. I just wasn't. My life didn't revolve around it like it does, now, or than it used to. So I stayed into it, but I didn't really like. If I missed a couple of weeks, it wasn't like I was like, oh, I got to go back and look up and see what I missed. I would just be like, I'll figure it out. You know what I mean? Like I'll catch up.
Yeah.
Or even if I didn't know what was going on, like I said, it doesn't matter. Like, why is this guy fighting this guy? Oh, who cares? You know, it's wrestling. So I would just, you know, I wasn't as devoted into it, but I never stopped. You know what I mean? Like,
I get exactly what you mean, but being such a diehard WCW fan, do you think that them shutting down, closing down, whatever word you want to use, like these are my guys? Do you think that maybe
really
dwindled the passion a little bit?
It really did. It did. I know it did because that's like in 2001. That's when that happened, and that was my senior year of high school. Like I was about to graduate too, so being the thing that I really, really was into was gone, and now like, you know, I'm seeing the guys on TV, but it's not the same. You know, I mean, I just didn't care as much. I mean, I still watched it. Like you said, I watched the Invasion Angle stuff, but like I was a WCW and ECW guy too. I loved ECW more than anything. Because I would travel to go see it. My mom would drop me off. It's like we would drive a couple hours, and she would drop me off to go watch the show and pick me up when it was over, because she would go eat dinner, go watch a movie, and then just pick me up afterwards. So I was a big ECW fan. So like to see that all of it go. So it wasn't just WCW disappeared, ECW did as well, and those were both like those are the ones I really liked. So it sucked. Yeah, that definitely was a big part of me losing interest, you know. But you know, that definitely think so. I definitely would say that definitely took a lot of the wind out of my sails as far as like my fandom and my like attention paying of what was going on in the wrestling world.
So one thing I'd be curious to know, like, if not saying I want them to fold because I really enjoy their product, but say AEW announced tomorrow that effective as of whatever date, because I'm not quite sure when this is going to go up yet, we will be ceasing like trading or whatever word you want to use. Do you think a lot of fans might go, right, that's it for me for wrestling now?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be the same way because, you know, you have people now that are so diehard AEW, and that's their thing, that if, you know, it's taken away from them, they're going to, you know, lose attention and not really give a shit about the alternative, you know, and what else is out there. But yeah, it's very similar. Like I do see the similarities there with, especially with the fandom, you know what I mean? Because and that's another thing too, is like AEW runs a lot down here. So like I get to, in my area, I went to 3 AEW shows this month. They're in my state 3 times in the last month. You know, WWE hasn't been down here once. They were in Greenville. They were down once in 3 years. You know, so it's like even now AEW is doing the same thing WCW did, as far as like, I'm going to run these markets that WWE doesn't do, and I'm going to run them well enough to where I'm going to saturate and absorb these fans. And I see that because firsthand down here, you know, because I see the same people at these shows too. So I see people traveling and going around, and I'll go to Jacksonville. I go to Jacksonville a lot. That's 7 hours for me, but I made trips down there this summer to cover it, you know what I mean, and do all that, because I do it for work, you know what I mean? So I'm going down there to work. So it's a little different for me, but I see the same fans everywhere, and there's fans traveling and following it around and stuff. And it's yeah, they've done a good job like securing a very good diehard fan base and a loyal fan base. And it does remind me of that WCW fan base, where there was so many people back in the day that were so pro that and anti the other. So
do you think that being, and I apologize, my interviews do tend to go all over the place.
Oh, that's so my style too. So you don't have to apologize to me, man. I'm always all over the place too. I have ADD and ADHD so bad, bro. Don't worry about it.
I've never been diagnosed, but I'm convinced I have slight ADHD.
Oh, I have been diagnosed. I have my prescription is so strong because of it. It's so bad. So yeah, no, don't worry. I have to try to stay myself on topic, so don't apologize about us bouncing around, man.
It's just the way my brain works for some reason.
I like it, man. I'm the same way. Don't apologize.
So like,
that's another thing too. Like that whole time machine. I'd got because I'm bad to apologize for stuff. That's another thing. I would tell myself not to apologize for everything all the time too. So yeah, man, don't apologize for how your brain works. You know what I mean? That is what it is, man. Don't worry about it.
So I lost my train of thought because you were complimenting me then. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, man.
So if we, do you think that, I don't want to call it toxicity, but diehard AEW fan, diehard WWE fan is healthy for the wrestling economy overall?
Yes and no. It's healthy because you've reached somebody with your product that's you've accomplished what you wanted. You've hooked them. But at the same time, you're getting a very, like you said, a toxic mindset that's so my way or the highway, like only
Mhm.
one right. There is no other. You know what I mean? That's not like, the more places there are to wrestle, the better. There's so many talented people out there. There needs to be more places than just two. There needs to be more than just two main wrestling companies for these people
Yeah.
to go and wrestle at. And that's why I really hope that places like GCW and Impact like can finally get to the level that they need to be, because there's so much talent that needs to be focused and featured on mainstream TV every week, and we don't have the opportunity to do that because there's just not enough time and there's not enough places. And so yeah, no, that it's a good and bad. It's a double-edged sword as well, because it's good that you have that loyal fan base and that you're the company that has somebody that's always going to be there and in the seats and what they want, and they've hooked the people. But at the same time, like you said, that toxic mentality of being that like it's mine or but my way is the only way that's right is not good.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah, wrestling is wrestling. Everybody just enjoy wrestling for what it is, and the style of wrestling you like is not necessarily the best. It's there's it's like a circus, man. There's something for everybody, and that's why I like shows like GCW, and like I used to love ECW so much, is because you get so many different types of things. You get the blood and guts, hardcore death matches. You get the lucha style matches. You get the technical mat wrestling, and then you get the like novelty show. So you get like there's so much wrestling and there's so many different styles that like nobody's is better. Nobody's one style and one product is right and better than the others. There's just it's all subjective. So the more that fans realize how subjective wrestling is, and there's so much for everybody, that it would be so much better. Yeah, toxic wrestling Twitter is such a terrible place.
Like, I joke about this all the time on my videos, but like, I use Twitter now to ask good people like yourself to come on, and that is literally it. Do you know what I mean?
Dude, yeah, I tend to stay out of the negative parts of Twitter as much as I can, even like because they try to bait you into it all the time, and I'm always trying to tell people, hey man, ignore those comments, just ignore it. And people are just trying to bait into bullshit, and yeah, I like your attitude there. Just ignore the negative, only go to Twitter for the positive stuff, and I kind of do the same thing. And if you cut out that out of your day, it's so much better. It really is. There's no need for just not random unwarranted negativity all the time, and wrestling Twitter is good for that. That's a fact.
Definitely. So, you talked about there needs to maybe be more bigger companies there. Before we get on to your work with bodyslam.net and stuff, like, which company do you think will be the one to become like the ECW of this generation? Not necessarily for the hardcore stuff, but maybe like a good number three, shall we say?
It's easy. Game Changer Wrestling.
Okay.
And I lived through the ECW, rise and fall when I was a kid, and I experienced it. Like I've been to the 2300 arena when I was a child. I went to WrestlePalooza '98 in Marietta, Georgia. So I mean, I went to these pay-per-views. I saw it. I've been to the atmosphere. I did the tours through the South when they would come down through here, and just the way the fans connect with the wrestlers at GCW, and just the atmosphere, and just that's the closest thing you're going to get to that today. And just the rise of this company. And like I've been doing this series all week because Hammerstein, their show at Hammerstein's this Sunday. So I've been doing
At time of recording, we'll just say that.
At time of recording, yeah. So we're recording on January 20th. I'll go ahead and say it. So the 23rd is the show at Hammerstein. And all week I've been doing and featuring GCW guys on this Road to Hammerstein interview series, because this whole thing is just, it's so, like I said, I grew up in the 90s, and that's really what hooked me, is that Monday Night Wars and the ECW, like being that alternative and being that like the cult following that they had. And this is it's the same feel for me. So I get just so excited for ECW or GCW shows, and it just reminds me of that ECW 96, 97 push to pay-per-view that they had. It's the same thing that they got. So like GCW is going to be on pay-per-view Sunday night, like real pay-per-view, not Fight TV only. They're going to be on satellite cable provider. Go to your cable satellite and look it up Sunday. You're going to see GCW TV on pay-per-view. And for a wrestling company, especially one that's considered an indie, to get that, like, that's huge. Like, I mean, look what it took ECW 5 years of like petitioning and to get on pay-per-view TV, and now these guys are doing it so quietly. And I think that they're slowly going to, I mean, right now I'd say Impact is probably considered your third, but I think Game Changer Wrestling is probably really the only one that's going to take that spot. And it might not happen right away, but in some minds, I think a lot of places, like, that's the most sought after place to work right now. You know, like Brett made a comment the other day in an interview where he's like, the amount of people that call me and reach out to be a part of Game Changer Wrestling is insane. And I can't even answer all their calls, and it's just not possible. He's like, I can't get back to these people. And it's also funny too that a lot of these people I know from talk, because I'm friends with a lot of the people on the roster and a lot of those guys at GCW, that a lot of these same names now that are begging to come work for GCW were the same people that were just trashing the product years ago when they were on TV too, being like, oh, they're just outlaw mud show garbage wrestling. And then now they're like, hey, can we come work for you? Because like, I need to get that rub of being over with the fan, because it's a hot place to work now. You know, they want to do that. So it's, even wrestlers think that too. Like, it's a thing. Like, that's where people want to go right now to work. So that's my number 3 right now would be Game Changer Wrestling. And it's not as necessarily biased because I know a lot of those guys, because I know a lot of guys at Impact too, but you know, I mean, I just, the feel and the hype around a GCW show is a lot more than the hype around a Impact Wrestling show.
So if we move on now to like your media career post your high school journey. When you came back, where does bodyslam.net come into it? And then where did you come back into the wrestling media?
Body Slam's way down the line. So when I came back, I did another site. It was Cheap Heat. Like, as I went with that gimmick of being like, what in wrestling, like Cheap Heat. So I ran a site. It was Cheap Heat for mid 2000s, so like 2008 through mid like 2015, 16. I think I was still doing that site. 2016. I think I was still doing it. And then I ended up stopping doing that because I had some stuff happen in my personal life to where I kind of got out of. And I was focusing more on indie wrestling back then too. Like, I wasn't really doing WWE news and stuff. I was doing just like indie coverage when I first came back, because that's actually who I got, what I was into, because I met some people. I met friends here. There was an indie company here in town, and there was a school here. So I met Ricky Morton and Chase Owens, and I actually was riding around with Chase and being his manager for a while. And I was riding around with Ricky and all those Eastern Tennessee and these guys here in my area. I got to be friends with all those indie guys. And like Cash Wheeler now at Steven the Fever Walters, I knew him as that. He'd come to my town. I'd see him every Sunday wrestle. He's from Asheville. So, I mean, that's 10 minutes from my house. So, I mean, I got to meet all these guys on the indies that are now like made it and have this in the big leagues. But back then I was real big into indie wrestling. So when I came back kind of out of my hiatus from being like, you know, as a hobby, I'm still watching wrestling, I might as well write about it and do some website stuff and see if I can make some money on the side. Because I went to film school, had a film and video production degree. So I was working at a casino doing video like on the weekends. And that was really all I had to do to pay my bills, is I would go and film concerts like Saturday night. That'd be, I could work 4 nights a week and pay my bills for the month. So I had all this downtime. So I just started doing wrestling stuff as a side, doing that indie coverage. And I was, you know, kind of like right now, like the big indie sites, like Pro Wrestling Ponderings and stuff like that, you know, that covers your indie. So I was trying to like, you know, be like them. And then eventually just like got, you know, just kind of, I had some stuff happen, like I said, in 2015, like legal stuff, you know, that kind of took away from my ability, being able to focus solely on my website there. We lost the job at the casino, so I had to pivot a little bit. So that website ended about 2015, and then I had about 2 down years. And then in 2017, I kind of decided I wanted to start doing the website again, because I was back to not having to, my work situation changed. So I was like, all right, well, I got more time again. So, but that website had kind of died. So I was like, well, I don't really want to fire this one back up. It's had like 2 years of not having steady updates. So it kind of fizzled out and died. So I was like, time to rebrand and come up with something. So that's when I like started figuring out what to do. And I decided to come up with bodyslam.net was available, and bought the domain. And I actually spent about 6 months to a year running that site without really sending out any people to it. Because when you do a hard launch, when you launch the site, you don't want people to you don't want to drive traffic to it and then have nothing to look at other than like the 12 articles that you put out that day. So I spent 6 months, 8 months of like writing news every day and recovering stuff every day like I would. So that I had like about a year of backlogged articles before I actually did a hard launch. And it kind of helped, I think, accelerate the growth, because I didn't do the, you know, hit your Google stuff and all that yet. You know, I waited until the launch to tie me in. So, you know, I had some people help me, but, you know, I did that about 2017. And I think the hard launch was the night of whenever WWE brought back Starrcade, that first year they did Starrcade.
So that house show you won.
Yeah, it was like the house show Greensboro, wherever it was. I went to that because it was 2 hours from my house. And that was the night that we launched. So that was the first night of Body Slam, because I was doing live results from that. And the traffic was really good because we were drawing traffic live, for the live results to Body Slam. And that was, I was like, all right, we're doing good with the site. So from that 2 months there in the winter, like November and December, was kind of like my test run to see how it was going to go. And I realized, like, I'm doing pretty good with this. So I kind of had to make a decision with what I was going to do work-wise, because I was doing photography at this point now. I was no longer doing video stuff. At the casino, I was doing photography. But what I was doing was school portraits. So, like, like yearbook photos and school pictures at school. Like
picture day.
Picture day at school. So I was working for a company doing that. So I was doing picture day every day, and also doing like team pictures at the afternoon. So if your soccer team, where you're standing with your on the ball, or you're doing your baseball picture or whatever, the basketball with you on your arm. I had to do all that. So I did that in the afternoon, school pictures during the day, and I was working all the time doing this stuff, and I had to kind of decide, like, and I was making just as much money doing the website as I was doing all these school stuff every day. So
that answers my follow-up question.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, so I had to figure out, like, all right, do I want to have 1 foot in and 1 foot out? And I'm splitting my time, and my monies are comparable. So I was like, I knew going in that, like, it's not easy doing a website, because this is my full-time job. Because I had to quit doing photography stuff for that company, because it's like, I need to focus on this all the time. But, realistically, you're not going to make money doing a website for a couple years, because the expenses going in, you're putting in more than you're making back, usually. So I knew I was going to have about 3 years of not making much money. So I kind of saved up for about 2 months until I was like, all right, guys, I'm done. I'm quitting, and I'm just doing this full time. So now I'm, like I said, so about 2018, beginning of 2018, I went full time doing Body Slam, and it really picked up about 2019, honestly. And it was right around the time AEW started up was when it really picked up for me. And it's because they, became an alternative to WWE, and they started offering media credentials to a lot of websites and stuff. So I was going and traveling now and doing scrums and interviewing people, and that's when the website really started blowing up in mid 2019. Because before that, WWE is real selective with, if they media for something, they're not going to give you interviews unless you're one of the big guys, So it was like hard to work your way up, even harder. But AEW allowing, a lot of like podcasters and smaller websites access really was the thing that accelerated me to being where I am now because of them. So, I test a lot of it to AEW, and it's not like, oh, you're on the payroll. It's like, no, it's because they like were accessible to, media and people that are to try to cover wrestling. They're like, they don't discriminate of who they allow into their little like circle of like, all right, we'll feed you something like WWE does. You see, they're like, they send Sports Illustrated and CBS News and all these people stuff, but they don't do it for the other guys.
Because they're trying to have mainstream coverage, I suppose.
Yeah. So they don't treat it. So once AEW started doing that, I'm going around more, I'm meeting more people, and it just accelerated my being able to get where I am. So yeah, that was the big thing. Was then when I came back and decided to switch to Body Slam, and then once AEW started, it really was the boom. That was really what it was, because it just created more interest in just wrestling in general as far as traffic, but it also like got me out there more, and not just a name. It's a face to a name, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because now people are seeing me out at shows. I'm going to these conventions and stuff, and it's just, there's just more happening. So yeah, that's really what it did. It was AEW coming and, having those media scrums. Like, that's a big deal for us. And especially with us in the wrestling media, that's a big deal for us to be able to sit there and interview all these, big wrestlers and big names. And it helps our YouTube channels. It helps our websites out and stuff like that. So that's a big deal for us. So when the pandemic hit too, that was hard because we lost all those,
Oh,
so
yeah,
that was another big setback as far as traffic goes and stuff like that. Is now we're not traveling to go do these shows and travel to cover, and my traffic fell off like a lot. So all the progress I'd made for 2 years, and then I was ahead of schedule, as far as being able to turn a profit. And then the pandemic hit, and it went right back to, I started over again, bro. It was literally back to the day one. Once the pandemic hit. So it's been a grind. We're back. We're getting back, and hopefully things don't go back to where they were as far as with this COVID stuff. But
no,
dude, I'm flying out. Like I said, this I don't know when this will air, but I'm leaving tomorrow morning to go to New York for Hammerstein for the GCW weekend, and I'm
you're gonna be there.
I'm gonna be there, man. That's why I was talking to you about scheduling. Is like I leave at 5 a.m. and so 12 hours from now I'm on a plane to go to Hammerstein. So yeah, so I'll be there Saturday for the Hall of Fame, Sunday for Hammerstein, and then I'm there all day Monday just to hang out with the guys because a lot of the wrestlers and I are gonna get up Saturday or Monday and just do the city.
Yeah,
they're all staying an extra day. So yeah, that's my big trip this week is going up to Hammerstein for the weekend. And that's why I said that's why I compared them to GCW is because I mean I could have chose that over Royal Rumble because it's like what's my January trip for wrestling coverage going to be? Am I going to go to the Royal Rumble and cover that in St. Louis, or would I go to Hammerstein and do GCW? And I weighed my options as what's more beneficial for me as a business and a site, and I get more coverage. I get more accessible. I'm more accessible to the wrestlers and the talents at GCW as far as like interviews and stuff than it would be at WWE. So
and
I chose GCW.
This might sound like a backhanded question, and I do apologize for that.
No, don't apologize, buddy.
Does passion also factor into your decision making as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because I can tell how passionate you are about GCW.
Yeah, and it's because like I said, I get into the product. I get into what I'm going and watching. I have fun. I have a lot of fun at a GCW show. I really do. And it's also it's exciting because you're getting to see the next crop of talent before they're famous. I mean, they're getting there, but like guys like Nick Wayne, 16 years old, Billy Starks, 17 years old, Jack Cartwheel, 21. Guys like this that are barely like they're still in. Some of these guys are still in high school, and some of them are still in college, and they're the future of wrestling. And you get to see these guys like weekly perform on this. So yeah, I really do get into GCW just because it's just more exciting to me. You get to see these guys that just their passion. They're so into it and they're so passionate about it. It just rubs off on the fans too. So no, I definitely think that makes a difference.
The question that I am curious to know as well is being in the wrestling media and having access to a lot more people. Do you think, and I'm not accusing you of being biased, but do you think that's why companies maybe paint AEW and GCWs in a more favourable light sometimes and give them more the benefit of the doubt than, say, WWE?
I definitely feel that way. Yeah, and I'm the first person. I said that going into it, like I might be biased because like I get to accessibility to these guys too, and it is, and that's how AEW was at first. But I try not to, I mean, I know that like, I mean, I'm aware of it. You know what I mean? Like I know that their accessibility and their, it does like. You don't want to talk negatively about somebody that's letting you in. You know what I mean?
But yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
You have to do your job at the same time, and I mean, I kind of got. This is my first scrum allowed back because at the last two I wasn't allowed at. I got denied the last two media scrums after never being denied one at AEW since their initial opening. After my big summer of busting news out, like my Daniel Bryan signing, and
that was you that broke it, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was me signing that Danielson had signed, and then I had his contract info. I broke that CM Punk was going to debut at the United Center. I had the date for the United Center. I had all this stuff, and like I kind of got in doghouse a little bit. I got grounded, so I didn't get to go to scrums. I didn't get to go to the full gear scrum or the all out scrum.
Oof.
And I was at the one at Double or Nothing. So I mean, like, yeah, I mean, the good journal, like some of us get in trouble from AEW still too. Like yeah, even though people say like, oh, you're biased, whatever. But no, like the good ones, we definitely get in trouble as well. But yeah, no, I do think it definitely. There has to be a bias. I think that I won't deny it and say that, yeah, I might have a little bit of bias to these companies because of the way that they, they treat me back. And I just, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think. I mean, as long as I can maintain I know that I can be
professional
and, when I need to report something negative, I do, you know what I mean? Like I said, I've had conversations with Tony. He's not been happy with some of the stuff I've written before. We've had conversations about it. So, you just have to, if you're going to do your job, you have to do your job, and you have to be ready for the, the repercussions too. So, I mean, like I said, I got in trouble for about 6 months, and that's how it is. So we'll see, hopefully, how it goes from here. But, Yeah, I definitely think that like I had a bias, and it's okay to be that way as long as you're not
Still professional with the other
as
companies, I
long as
suppose.
yeah, and the person needs like the person in the media needs to be aware that they have a bias too. Because I do think that's a thing. I really do. And I think WWE does the same way too. So these guys that are diehard WWE media people, I think it's because WWE is the ones that feeds them things and gives them access. And I don't see why. It's the same way. It goes both ways. It's a two-way street. The
Hmm.
same people that have WWE does the same thing to people the way AEW does, and you know, it is what it is. But yeah, you have to be able to find that middle ground to be professional, even though that some companies give you more access than others.
And you're still a fan as well.
Yeah, and you have to be a fan, and you have to figure out at some point too. That's what's even more hard, is to be like, man, I'm a fan. So like, do I spoil this? You know what I mean? Because there's so
Yeah,
many times that I could spoil things, and I've been pretty selective with the stuff that I've spoiled, but at other times, like, there's so much more that I could put out there that I didn't. But I
but
also
also,
I don't want. Yeah, you
is
don't
it
want to.
like spoiling it for yourself as well?
Yeah, and also you have to risk burning bridges too. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, I can, if I put stuff out there, I mean, I'm going to ruin my status with these companies a little bit, and I'm going to hurt my access too. So I kind of have to be selective of what, like, is it worth it to put this one out there? Is it worth it for me? Am I going to get enough back on my end to like risk possibly not getting interviews or not getting access to events for 6 months? And there's a fine line there too. And a lot of times I'm friends with a lot of these guys too. So a lot of these times,
Eh,
like, I don't want to I don't want to put my friends in the situation where like their business is aired out there too. And it's hard to like, you just have to, I don't know. I went to school for this too. So I went to school for journalism. So there's an etiquette class that you have to take, and you have to kind of, you just have to know, it's when you're working and when you're not. You have to know when things are off the clock and when you're on the clock and when you're off the clock. And
fair
sometimes you have to,
enough.
sometimes you have to risk hurting some feelings, man. You do.
Hmm.
You
That
know how many
brings.
times? Yeah, there's a lot of times that my buddies are wrestlers. They get mad at me, like, why they get so mad about me writing something. I'm like, dude, it's my job. I'm sorry. Like, I apologize, and they either get over it and move on, or they don't, and that happens sometimes.
Mhm.
What can you do?
So that brings me nicely to, because I've got two more questions about wrestling journalism,
Cool.
a segment that I call generic questions, and then we'll
All
end
right.
with my final question, if
All right.
that's okay.
That's
So,
perfect, man.
what are two pieces of advice that you would give someone that wants to start their own wrestling journalism company, but then two pieces of advice that you would also give someone that wants to work for a wrestling journalism company?
It's hard to make money doing this, so like, just be ready for that. You know what I mean? Because there's not a lot of money in it unless you're some of the big sites. The big sites make money, but yet, like, you have to get there. And it's not to opening your own website. Just be ready for the struggle.
Mhm.
And also wrestling is a very fickle business too. I mean, some days you have a lot of people reading, and then some days you don't, and it's like, man, you can't figure out why. And it's wrestling news is very weird. It's not like regular news in other entertainment industries. So just be ready for it. Anybody that's getting into wrestling journalism, be ready, especially ready for the people online, because
Ooh,
they
as we
are
were talking about earlier.
in. You got people that they troll you to troll you, and they bait you into stuff, and then you got you just got to be thick skinned too, because you're gonna. I mean, dude, I got messages on Christmas Day telling me to kill myself because of
I'm sorry, what
Andrade.
now?
Yeah, because of Andrade and Charlotte news from a month before, right? Like, so like they'd broken up, and I wrote that they broke up, and they got back together around Christmas. So I mean, that happens. You know what I mean? Like, you break up, you get back together.
People are human,
Everybody,
man.
if you're in a relationship, that happens sometimes.
Mm.
So I guess, like, they hadn't been together for a month and a half, but now they're back together again. So now they're back together posting pictures, and I'm getting flooded on Christmas Day being like, I knew you were a lying piece of shit. Go kill yourself. And I'm like,
What
dude,
the hell?
you know what I mean? So like, you can't let things get to you. So like, if you're going to be doing wrestling news, just be ready for that kind of nonsense, and just do you, man. Ignore it. Ignore the bullshit, because you can't cater to everybody too. Like, I
Yeah,
get people mad at me for covering stuff. They're like, nobody wants to read this crap. I'm like, somebody does, dude. Like,
yeah.
you can't cater to everybody. You know what I mean? You're going to have people mad. You're going to have people happy. You can't be sensitive if you're going to be in
It's
wrestling
fickle.
news. Yeah, you got to have thick skin. You can't be sensitive. And like, I understand why like I said, when I was 18, 17 years old, got out of it because I wasn't at the point where I could handle that kind of criticism and that type of shit to where I could ignore some of it. You know what I mean? I wasn't able to tune some of it out yet. So if you're going to do wrestling news, just be ready to handle just some of the, like, I love wrestling fans, but man, at the same time,
Some of them are just weirdos.
They're the worst, bro. Some of them are the absolute worst.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's some of them are the absolute best. Like, you get both ends of the spectrum. So it's just be ready to handle a bunch of bullshit, and don't be ready to make a lot of money doing it right away either. And if you're
what about someone that wants to join a site?
That's what I say. If you want to, I mean, anybody can join a site. Like, I mean, all you have to do is ask. You know, just apply. But what we're looking for usually is, you know, entry level stuff. You're going to be aggregating news.
I was going to say, what are you looking for when hiring people?
For entry level people that are coming in, you know, you got to start somewhere, right? And I mean, that's what I did when I started. When I was a kid, I was just aggregating news. So it's like what everybody else is reporting, you cover it. You know, like, you know, Mike Johnson said this today, so you know, you cover that scoop, and then you citate, you do proper citation, and you do all the stuff correctly, and you put out an article. I mean, that's what everybody does. It's normal, not just in wrestling. It's in normal news altogether. You know, I mean, everybody does it. So that's where you start. You just got to start out aggregating, and then from there you start networking, and that's really the key. And that's what one of my skill sets is. I'm a good networker. And when I was in film and video production school, that's what my teacher had me do. Is she put me in charge of products because I network. I know people. I'm good at like making things happen. So like,
and you're a good conversationalist as well. By the sound of this interview,
that. So that's just one of those things. Like, if you're going to do this and you're trying to make a name for yourself and you actually want to be the person that's breaking scoops, you're going to have to network. And that's not the easiest thing to do because you have to meet these wrestlers. You have to get to know wrestlers. You have to get to know people in the company, and you have to earn their trust, and you have to get them to want to give you information. And, you know, a lot of times I get stuff I'm not allowed to run with. Like, most of the time, honestly, I get stuff I'm not allowed to run with. So, and I'm one of the people that puts out a lot less exclusives because
you're scared almost.
No, these are my buddies. These are my friends, and they tell me stuff off the record. They tell me stuff off the record because they're like, "Hey, man, this is like me talking to you as a friend, not me talking to you as a journalist." So it's like, a lot of times I'm like, "Can I use that?" And they're like, "I'd rather you not." And, you know, just because these are my friends, I won't. But if it was, you know, somebody I didn't know as well, I'm like, "Well, you shouldn't have told me. I'm going to use it." But, you know,
fair enough.
You know what I mean? But like, yeah, I mean, you just got to know how to network, and you got to know how to meet people and make friends. And my advice is, like, the way I did it is I went to these indie shows.
Yeah.
And at these indie shows, you're seeing up and coming stars. You're seeing the guys that just come off TV. Get to know these guys, talk to these guys, meet people, make friends, and then from there, you know what I mean. Anybody can do this. It's really not hard. It's really not hard. If you go to wrestling shows, I mean, I know a lot of people that go to wrestling shows. These wrestlers know them by name because they just travel around and see it. And I'm like, and they tell them stuff all the time. Like, they talk to them and tell them news and scoops. I'm like, see, that's all you gotta do right there. Now you could be a journalist. So it's really just about like not being a weirdo at a show.
I know what you mean.
Not being a weird guy that's a weird fan, and just, you know, finding the middle ground of knowing how to network. And that goes with any kind of social scenario too, though. Like in any job, any type of thing, it's just about networking. And wrestling is very much network oriented too. You know what I mean? It's all like, about who you know. It's
like, for me, I knew who you were, but I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but Rob Wilkins over at Fightful.
Rob does a podcast with me. He's doing an MMA podcast for Body Slam, and I'm a good friend with Rob. I hung out with Rob in Minnesota in November. Yeah, I love Rob.
He was the one that was like, if you can, bro, try and get Cassidy Haynes on.
I appreciate that. No, I love Rob. I will put Rob over any day of the week, man. Rob's great. And yeah, it's just, and the easier like you said, if you can conversate and you can talk, like, that's the main thing, is just be yourself, man. Just be you, have fun doing this. I have fun doing this. Like, I'm a wrestling fan at heart. You know what I mean? So, and you can't take this too seriously too. It's wrestling news. Yeah. You're writing news about a business that's entertainment. It's a sport disguised as entertainment, basically. You know what I mean? Like, every bit of this is athletic, and it's a sport, but it's predetermined. So, I mean, you can't take things too seriously here. You know what I mean? Like, you can't get too mad about this and can't take this too seriously, even though it's what we love and what we do. You just have to, I don't know, man. it's wrestling, guys. You know,
Yeah.
like anybody can do it. It's wrestling. You know, nothing's too, and all of us are pretty much approachable too. Like that's one thing I love
Yeah.
about these guys in media that I've become to know, like the Fightful guys and a lot of these other podcast people is, you know, most of us all just love wrestling and we will
Yeah.
love talking to you about it. And we're all.
It's like I've got very lucky the amount of cool people that I've been able to interview. I would say that.
Yeah, I mean, we're all the same person at heart. You know what I mean? Like we all are. We're talking about wrestling, so we're all into the same thing. So I mean, you know, it's wrestling family is a good thing, man. I say that all the time, and it's a thing that, you know, my wrestling family. It's a real thing. There is such a thing as wrestling family, and Rob's part of my wrestling family, man. I love Rob, so I'm glad he put us in touch, man. And now you're there too, man. Now I know you.
Yeah.
You're one of the group, the gang now too, brother. So
Definitely. So
I'd love to have some of our stuff now in the future too, man. So I know you're in England, but we'll figure it out. We'll figure out a time way to do some
definitely.
stuff.
I'd love to do something like that, man. Like,
Love to have you.
So if we go into my segment that I call generic questions, which is essentially questions that I'm sure you get answered on Twitter, asked on Twitter. It's very late in the day over here. I do apologize.
Yeah. Oh, dude, don't apologize. You're good, buddy. I know.
That you get asked on Twitter all the time, but now you can be like, look, I've answered this. Go watch this.
Yeah, let's do it. Fire me off. I love questions. The more random, the better.
Favorite match of all time?
Ooh, Halloween Havoc '97, Eddie and Ray.
Ooh, a deep cut that we haven't had. Please elaborate.
It's one. I think it's the opener of the pay-per-view, and it's, if you go look, everybody talks about that being one of the best matches of all time, and it's a banger, dude. These guys, and that's the peak Rey Mysterio too. I think he's like 23 years old, and it's.
Is this the one where he has that purple gear on?
Mm-hmm. And it's the Joker, the Joker gear one. Yeah.
Yes.
That's that match, man. And it's this, everything they do is just intense, high impact. They're all over the place. Like it's almost a perfect wrestling match. I advise everybody to check that out. And it's one of those things too. It's like that style of wrestling, those guys at that time period, like it. If it wasn't for them, you wouldn't have your Johnny Garganos, your half the people that were in NXT before they did their cleaning house to bring in their new wave of NXT. But you know what I mean? That like the undersized, the smaller guys, you know what I mean? If it wasn't for your Chris Benoit's,
you wouldn't have like your Bryan Danielsons, your
Seth Rollins, your any of those guys. So your Sami Zayn's. So yeah, no, like that's a match that anybody that, and that's probably like if I was like, tell me a cruiserweight match. If I'm gonna get into the cruiserweights, like what do I that match? For sure, that match. And I just watched. I've been chronologically running through WCW because I get bored in my spare time. So I started the first Nitro, and I've been running through it and then hitting pay-per-views along the way. And I just finished Halloween Havoc '96 today. So that's where I am. So
you're like, now. Please hurry up so I can get.
I'm getting there. Yeah, we're getting there. So the one that I got today was Rey Mysterio and Dean Malenko. In that one, that was the opener. That was the opener there, and it was the one for the mask, because Dean stole Ray's mask, and they were going for the cruiserweight title, and it was that was fun. So yeah, any Rey Mysterio, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero cruiserweight stuff, I always tell people to watch. But one match, that match, Eddie and Rey Mysterio, Halloween Havoc '97, and it's the Joker, purple and black. Dear Ray, yeah.
Favorite pay-per-view of all time, and this is a two-pronged question, because favorite pay-per-view you've seen live, and then just favorite pay-per-view in general that you weren't at live.
Now, live as in I watched on TV, or live as in I was in person attending?
In person.
In person pay-per-view. WrestlePalooza '98 ECW. Yeah, because that's right at like ECW had already hit its peak pretty much, and it kind of plateaued out basically, because that rise to pay-per-view, and they've been on pay-per-view for about a year, and that's before they kind of started falling off. Like into '98, '99 is when they kind of like people started saying they were on their way down. So '98, that was as
I said with your last one, that's a deep cut we haven't had, so please elaborate.
That pay-per-view was at the Cobb County Civic Center in Marietta, which I was born in Marietta, so I went back home to visit family that weekend and got to do that show. But like you get Al Snow right before he went back to WWF too. So you got they sent Al Snow to ECW to like become somebody else, because he was Leaf Cassidy, New Rockers, and they sent him to ECW to go be Al Snow. He was still wearing the same gear, the New Rocker X gear, but that's when he did the head, when he had the fake mannequin. So I remember being there in the crowd and them passing out all the fake mannequin heads. So we all had the white styrofoam head. So when he
Have you
came
still
out,
got that in your collection at all?
I do. It's in the other room in my closet. But
No,
I do
just
have it
out of
still.
curiosity, have you still got it in your collection?
Yeah, I do, and I've got tons of other cool shit too. Like I'll show you something else in a second. But
I'm gonna ask you your favorite part of your collection in a minute, if you don't mind.
all right, yeah, I'll show you. We'll get to that then. But yeah, so that pay-per-view was really cool because like that atmosphere of that was like everybody in the arena was banging the head, like head banging their mannequin statue with the strobe lights, and it wasn't just like everybody. It didn't matter if you were an Al Snow fan or not. Everybody was doing it, and that was just one of the really cool moments. But that was probably my favorite pay-per-view because I was 15, almost 16 years old at the time, so I'm like, I'm able to have good fun. I'm out there on my own, chilling and having a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was probably my favorite. But I'll also say because I was a little bit older, the last pay-per-view before that was, like I said, Super Brawl 93, Super Brawl 3, 1993, and I was a kid. I was 12. So
was that the Sting Vader one?
Sting and Vader.
Yeah,
so that was a little different. I mean, those are the pay-per-view. I went to Nitros in between, but as far as pay-per-views live and in person, that was the next one I went to. But I got to watch every pay-per-view live on TV because my mom worked for the cable company. So it was the best life hack in the world, man. The cable company was like, hey, record these on VHS for us, and that way if anything goes wrong on the stream or the feed, we have a VHS copy. So I got them all for free. So I got every WCW and WWF pay-per-view for free for my entire childhood. So I was spoiled as hell, man. So I watched every pay-per-view growing up. So WrestlePalooza 98. As far as watching one on TV, my favorite, I would say, was probably maybe WrestleMania 12.
Okay.
And that was more or less because of like the environment too. I had a party for that one. Like we had people over. You know what I mean? That was like my first WrestleMania kind of gathering party where people that weren't wrestling fans came over to watch it at the house. So that was fun. But yeah, those are my two favorite in person and on TV ones, I'd say.
Favorite superstar of all time, and then favorite superstar currently in wrestling.
All right, all time. It's a toss up. Ric Flair and Great Muta. And I'm gonna show you
different reasons for different ones.
I got my Great Muta tattoo right here. I don't know if we can.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I got my Muta tat. See, I got a Juice and Liger right here. I got a Vader bomb on this one. Hold on. So I got my wrestling tats, but different reasons. Like I like the bad guys. Ric Flair though was
ultimate bad guy.
Ultimate bad guy. First wrestler I really got into because, like I said, him and Sting was the first match I remember watching. I don't remember any of the other card from the entire Clash of Champions one other than Sting and Flair because I was, like I said, 4 or 5 years old. But I was all in, and just seeing Flair as a kid because I got to see all the house show events, just the way he carried himself and the way the fans hated him. I like the bad guys, so like Ric Flair, all time favorite, but Great Muta was my favorite to watch in the ring as far as like his stuff, and he scared me when I was a kid. I was like afraid of Great Muta, and I just loved watching everything he did was just seemed so much more intense. Just like even the elbow drops, just the snap, everything he did, he just seemed to deliver so much more power behind it. Just the way he did it. Just Great Muta, in-ring favorite. Ric Flair, persona-wise, all-time favorite.
And then favorite superstar currently. And if we can it be someone you're not friends with, please?
I was about to say, like, that's a hard one because I'm biased, but one that I watch, everything they do, no matter what, I would say, favorite current guy. That's real tough, man. Current wrestling product it's not a friend of mine that I like watching their stuff.
I say current, but this probably isn't going to air till like May, June time.
Yeah, no, and current product. I know honestly, I would honestly probably say that Pac is one of my favorites.
I love what he's doing with the eye thing at the minute.
Yeah. Those guys are kind of like that. Those are two of my favorites to watch, just because like I know what I'm getting. Pac and Malachi in the ring, everything they do is so good, and they're some of the people they're overlooked, I think, a lot of times. But I know Pac kind of, but not well. But I love everything he does, and I really like this week you said the Daredevil with the blind, like he's now currently.
It's quite funny because normally I watch Dynamite like tonight at time of recording, but just didn't get time with researching and stuff to do this. But the one thing I was like, wait, what is this Pac thing? I had to watch that beforehand. I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
No, that's great. I really like what he's doing right now with that character and his feud with them. But no, like Pac's probably my favorite in-ring guy right now, and he's a little dude. So just to see everything he does, he kind of reminds me of like Muda, like I said before, with this everything he does has just seems like it has just a little bit more behind it. You know what I mean? Like even when he drops an elbow drop, it's just like it's got more snap to it, you know, and just everything he seems to have just a little bit more momentum, a little bit more energy behind it. And it's just, yeah, like I love watching Pac in the ring. He's probably my favorite right now. Yeah.
Favorite theme song of all time, and then favorite theme song currently.
I really was a fan of the Wolfpack theme as a kid. The NWO Wolfpack rap song. That was probably one of my favorites as a kid, and in general still now. But current one, I like the Gorillas of Destiny.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. That one's fire. But man, Ruckus at AEW, everything Ruckus does is so good. Mikey Ruckus.
And considering when the company first started, I don't think I'm wrong in saying this. Their theme song game was a bit weak.
Yeah, they brought him in a little after they started, and they were also doing a lot of outsourcing some of their songs.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think Gorillas Destiny is probably my current favorite wrestling theme. I really do like Malachi Black's, but that's not really as much of a wrestling theme because that's his band, his friend's band in Amsterdam or whatever the band is. Like Malachi Black knows them, so that's really like a metal band.
The fact that AEW uses real music.
Mm-hmm. I do. It reminds me of the old days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, ECW did that. Yeah, like I love watching Paul Heyman talk about it. Like, how did you get away with doing all that back then? He's like,
we just didn't. From what I know.
He's like, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, so we just did it. And I'm like,
and then awesome. If we got in trouble, we got in trouble.
Yeah, you got in trouble. We dealt with it. Had a lawyer handle it. So yeah, like I love that about it. And I liked when WWE did a little bit of it too. You know, they had back in the mid 2000s there, they had some, you know, band in early 2000s, they had bands come in and do, you know, songs. They had, I think Edge had Rob Zombie at one point, you know what I mean? And the Dudley Boys had
he had an Alter Bridge song as well.
Yeah, so you know,
I know that was technically made for him, but you see my point.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I like that the AEW does that. I kind of do, and I think it kind of helps relate, I think, the character to the crowd.
Yeah.
The Jungle Boys song, for example. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think if they came up with a song for Jungle Boy that was similar, the crowd wouldn't be as into it and everybody waving their hands and singing as they would now that it's like Tarzan Boy, a song that like from the 80s that they know and they've heard. Adam Cole's is an example of being like, oh, they all get it, they all do the boom. But I don't think they would have done that with like with Jungle Boy if they had come up with a generic one similar, you know? So,
I think in the case of Adam Cole, it's more Adam Cole made the song and the song has made Jungle Boy, if that makes sense.
Exactly. No, it makes perfect sense. I agree with that 100%. And like them using the Pixies for Orange Cassidy, I think that's perfect as well too. You know what I mean? And that, because that song is a perfect, like, it fits his personality so well that like anything else that they did, because I remember when he first came, they just had him use the Best Friends music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, all right, I mean, that kind of works, but he needs something for himself, and this is a good example of that. No, I like what AEW does with their music. I really do.
Mm-hmm. So, before we go, because I don't normally ask.
Much time as you need, buddy.
No, but I'm not going to lie. I have carers coming in like 10 minutes, so we got to wrap this up.
Yeah.
But what is your favourite thing in your collection then?
All right. So, a couple things. 2 pieces. I'm going to bring them out. I've got this from the most recent, it's from GCW back in September.
That light tube?
It's a light tube. So I was in September at 3 Cup Stuffed the night before the Art of War Game show, and I was there with like Sean Ross Sapp and a bunch of us, and this flew right between us. Like,
wow.
Right between our heads. And he goes and gets it and comes back to the group, and he's like going to give it to tries to give it to the friends we were with, and the girls didn't want it. They're like, we don't want that. And he's like, well, I know you'll take it. I'm like, dude, yeah. Put it in my hoodie, took it back with me. But this sharp at death piece of death flew through the air. I love this. It was during the main event there, the last match of 2 Cup Stuff or 3 Cup Stuff. And then this is also one of my favorites. And this right here is Do you have any guess as to where this came from? Who this might have been associated with?
Steve Austin.
Close. The Sandman. So, random House of Hardcore show. So like Tommy Dreamer show, you know, in like couple years.
Yeah.
2015. Yeah, it was 2015. It was the ECW arena at a House of Hardcore show. And I'm just front row and just hanging out, just enjoying it as a fan. Main event was Young Bucks versus the Dirty Heels. So it was Bobby Roode and Austin Aries. And at the end of the match, Sandman comes out to celebrate and do his beer bash. So like he comes into the ring, he's got his case of Tall Boys, and they're in there, and he just comes right to the corner and looks right down at me and my buddies, and he's like, hey, he's drunk as shit. He's like, get in here. And I look over at my buddy, and I'm like, is he talking to us? I'm like kind of pointing at my chest, and he starts screaming again. He's like, yeah, you, get in here. And I'm like, me? He's like, yeah, you, come on.
He's 12 sheets to the wind by this point, right?
Trashed. So I'm like, shit, all right. So I'm like, and this is the ECW arena. So my mind is like, oh, this is that ECW moment where the entire crowd's going to follow me into the ring. So I jump the rail. I look over at the main Atlas security guy.
What did the security do?
The main Atlas security guy is just sitting there like arms crossed, just looks at me. And I'm like, okay, he's not coming after me. Cool. So now I'm like, this is all in slow motion. So I've got like a couple steps to the ring. I'm like, all right, how am I going to get into the ring? Am I going to dive under like a badass? I'm like, no, you'll probably screw that up. You should get in. You
I shouldn't laugh. I'm so sorry.
No, that's why I didn't do it. So I'm like, no, if I slide, I'm going to botch that. So I'm going to like, oh, I don't want to hear a "you fucked up" chant at the ECW arena. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm going to get up. So like, I go in, I go to like step through the ropes, and literally as soon as I get my second foot through the rope, I look up and there's two cans just boom, boom. Tall Boys hit me, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm glad I didn't. And I look down, and my buddy was trying to be the smooth guy and like slide under the ropes, and he like
don't tell me he fell.
He catches his arm on like the rope, and this goes underneath, so he kind of just like whoop and like sprung himself back.
Oops.
So he like whoop and he like launched himself back to the floor and like laid on the ground. Here goes the chant that you fucked up. I'm like, that's why I didn't do that.
I'm so glad that wasn't me.
Yeah,
is all I could probably think.
Because I've been in rings before at this point. You know, it's not like the first one. I'd gone to wrestling school and I'd trained, I'd managed Chase, and I've promoted shows in my town and booked shows and ran shows. So I'm like, I'm not unfamiliar with the ring, but I'm like, dude, you're gonna screw this up. But yeah, like so then we did a beer bash. So I got pictures of it online of like us toasting the Bucks game.
I'm gonna try to see if I can find them tomorrow.
I'll shoot them to you. I got 5, 6 pictures.
Oh, please.
Yeah, I've got them on my computer. I'll shoot them to you. Just remind me when we get off here. But yeah, so I did all that, and we did it in the Bucks. Of course, the Bucks don't drink, so they did the toast. But then as soon as they got done, they just looked at me and go, "Here you go," and just gave me their 2 beers. So I have now 4 beers. And
you didn't Steve Austin it, did you?
Well, I didn't have a choice. Sandman comes over and does it for me and my buddy. So he's now pouring beer while we're holding our beers. He's just pouring it into our mouths. So it was wild, man. That was a cool moment. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really. It was funny too. So now, like the Bucks, before I started doing all these AEW scrums, when I would see them there at the beginning, they would always kind of like.
We know you, but we don't know where from.
Recognize you, but they couldn't remember where it was from, right? So now it's like it's funny. They'd be like, I'm like, I drank your beers. They're like, and at the ECW arena, I'm like, yep, beer bash. They're like, that's right. I knew you from somewhere. So yeah, like they knew me from the guy that drank their beers that night. But those 2 are probably some of my favorite pieces of memorabilia, just because they're like, you know, there's something that nobody else has. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. What is, because obviously memorabilia gets lost, and we really do need to wrap this up. But
that's fine, buddy. Yeah.
Well, you're so interesting. I keep thinking of questions.
I appreciate it, man. I can talk forever too. So
we'll have to do a part 2 later in the year, I think.
I'd love to do it.
So, what is one piece of memorabilia? Because obviously it gets lost, or when times get hard, maybe you've had to sell stuff that you're like, oh, I wish I still had that.
I never sold anything, but like, let me show you an example. So if you look up here, see this, like the NWO sold out seat cushion up there?
Mm-hmm.
That's the actual, like from 1997, the pay-per-view, whenever they did it, January 25th. My mom, like I said, worked for the cable company, so they would send out promotional shit every month. WCW always would. WWF never sent it to us. So every month my mom would get like the t-shirts for every pay-per-view, just hats, you know, duffel bags, like all types of stuff, and like stuff like that. So like I have just tons of stuff, but somewhere either in this house or in my mom's house is garbage bags of every WCW pay-per-view t-shirt from like 1994 through like 1999, 2000. for some reason. So like that is my treasure chest of like where is that? That's what I want. I can't find it. I have no idea where they are, but I know they didn't get thrown out. But there's just like 2 contractor garbage bags. They're just like 4 feet tall, just packed with wrestling shirts. And I want those so bad. Vintage like pay-per-view shirts from the 90s, man.
I can imagine there being that yellow Edge and Christian one in there.
No, this is before that, dude. This is like,
like
94 through like 98, 99. And it was mostly WCW because WWF never sent promotional shit down here for the cable company.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, like I've got I mean, I love stuff like this. I got like my old VHS tapes from like WCW. I got tons. Man, my memorabilia is, this is cool too. So this piece of table behind me from a show. It's got Nasty Boy Brian Knobbs signed it. Ricky Morton signed it in 1998.
So cool.
Dave Jericho.
I feel like we could do an entire episode on just your memorabilia collection.
Yeah, Dave Jericho ended up being Kid Cash, signed this. And this, I saw one of the Hardys jump off a helicopter here in my town when I was a kid. It was a show when he was like 18 before they got signed. So like, yeah, dude, like I got tons of crazy random stuff like that I like hoarded over the years that I've got somewhere, like, you know, nonsense.
I mean this next bit in the nicest possible way, but if wrestling ever tanks and you have to sell your stuff, you could make a fortune on half this stuff.
I almost did once just because I was like, you know, I don't need any of this stuff. It was before I set it all up behind me when I just had boxes and boxes of it.
Yeah.
I was like, no. And I was going through some legal stuff where I had to have a lot of lawyer fees. I was like, I'm not going to sell it. And I never did. I almost did, but I actually boxed everything up and took it to WrestleCade. Because I was meeting a buddy of mine that wrestles, and he was like, I'll buy everything you got. And I was like, well, dude, I got a lot of stuff. Like, I was gonna tell him, I was like, man, I got unopened this right. Well, there it is. Undertaker, a Hasbro figure from France. So it's like an unopened, like 1991 WWF Hasbro figure, but the French version. I'm like, some of these things aren't cheap, man. But he's like, I'll buy it all, bro. So I boxed everything up and took it, and then he partied too much that weekend and spent all his booking money for his wrestling. So he's like, dude, I spent all my booking money I was going to spend on that. I can't do it. So I was like, you son of a bitch. So I drove it back home, and that was the one time I was going to buy
but
it.
Are you grateful in that way? Thank God for that.
Yeah, he came over to the house today. He's a wrestler. A lot of people would probably know who he is, but I'm not going to mention his name. But yeah,
tell me off camera, please.
Yeah, I will tell you off camera. He came over today and looked at it all, and he was like, "Oh, Daddy, I remember when I bought all that stuff, brother." And I'm like, "You almost did, man. I remember all this shit." But yeah, I love a wrestling collection and stuff. Is that there's so much stuff that's not even visible, bro. Like I've got a whole nother closet full of just unboxed figures and just I don't know. I need to go through it all.
So as we wrap this up, the question that I end all my videos on is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media, we're all sort of gonna live forever in some sort of way. So what is one video or podcast that you're like, or in your case, article written as well, that you're like, don't go back and view that. I've grown a lot since then, maybe because of something not you said, or maybe because it's not aged well because the story changed or something. And then what is one that you're like, go back and watch that. I want people to know my body of work.
That's a hard question. I'm pretty. There's not many. If I put my name on it, I'm pretty good with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it's like it ends up being terrible. Like I enjoy a lot of like bad stuff just as much as good stuff. So like I've done some bad videos and good videos, but there's a lot of like I told you I managed back in the like early 2010, 2011 area. I did like 2 years of managing. So if you go look hard enough on YouTube, you can probably find me managing some pretty famous guys now. Like I managed Chase a lot.
As Cassidy Haynes, or did you have another name?
It mostly was my name, but usually they didn't put my name out there because I'm just there with Chase. So it's like Chase Owens and then the other guy that's with him, which is me. But there's videos of us. Yeah, a lot of it's pretty bad. Like I wasn't the best, but you can see the progression. Like I would get better, but like a lot of those. Bro,
you should watch some of my early videos. Aye.
And like I mean, my chops videos, like those are pretty hard for me to watch, just because like I don't know, being a guy, I'm a big dude, so I'm like, oh man, look how fat I look. I look like a sack of potatoes, but whatever. You know what I mean? Like I do it. I take the chops shirtless. I get a lot of bullies on that. You should put your shirt back on. I'm like, dude.
No.
What are we in high school, dude? Like, are you really trying to bully a 39-year-old man about his appearance, dude? Fuck off.
Then what is the one that you're like, go check out that if you want to know my body of work?
Go check out AJ Gray chopping me. Look up my Cassidy Takes Chops from Pro Wrestling, because I actually got this series, my Cassidy Takes Chops from Pro Wrestlers series. I've taken a break over the last month because I ran out of like canned recordings, and I haven't gone to recording new ones with people. But me taking a chop from AJ Gray is one of my favorite things I've ever done. He hits me so hard, bro. I'd turn into like a video game character. Like, you ever played Mike Tyson's Punch Out back in the day, like the old boxing game for NES?
I'm aware of it.
You're aware
It's
of
like
it?
an arcade game, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a King Hippo. There's a spot when King Hippo gets hit where he's just like, he's too fat to get up, and he's just like, and he falls down and can't get up. I literally looked like that because he hit me so hard. I flew like 10 feet back, like,
wow,
to the ground. So yeah, go look up on Body Slam's YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, type in bodyslam.net, you'll find it. But there's a playlist of Cassidy Takes Chops from Pro Wrestling.
I'll find it purely because what I do is I link the good video and the bad video in the description.
So I'll try to find a bad video of me managing some chase videos from back in the day. I think I can find one for that. But look at me taking a chop, because, like, dude, anybody that thinks that wrestlers get that you can take a chop from a wrestler and that's nothing, dude, watch me get hit so hard. Yeah. I'm a big dude. I'm 6'1", like 225. Dude. I'm a big dude. He hits me so hard, like I literally went back 10 feet and slid across a floor, like a hall floor, man. It hits me so hard. So watch that. And like I said, that segment, those chops things got me interviewed and featured in Sports Illustrated this year.
Oh wow.
So yeah, Sports Illustrated hit me up. They're like, we really want to do a feature on your show. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, your chops show. And I'm like, are you serious? And they're like, yeah, I love it. They're like, well, this is amazing. So like, yeah, I tell everybody to go watch that, because I'm taking punishment for you guys. So go look up Cassidy Takes Chops from Pro Wrestlers. I've got some good ones on there. JD Drake from AEW, who's known as one of the hardest choppers in wrestling.
Have you taken a flare chop yet?
Not from Ric Flair, but I mean, they're all, JD Drake, the chop from JD Drake, because I'm there with him and Anthony Henry. And Anthony Henry, who was NXT's Asher Hale, just got released. So I'm standing there with both of them, and Anthony Henry's like, so I've taken chops from Walter and from JD Drake, and he's like, JD Drake's are worse.
Have you taken a water chop yet?
No, but I will. I'm not scared to, because apparently I've taken a chop from JD Drake, and everybody like Anthony said, he's like, I've taken them both. He's like, JD's are worse. So I've taken chops from JD Drake. I've taken a chest kick from Anthony Henry, Asher Hale, NXT's Asher Hale. He kicked me in the chest. So he's like, I don't chop, but I do chest kicks. And I was like, well, let's do it. Nyla Rose has chopped me. Marco Stunt, some GCW guys, Jordan Oliver, Colby Carino's chopped me. Charlie Tiger, Masha Slamovich, Masha from Impact, she's lit me up. White Mike, some of the Ugly Ducklings. Just go look at those. Those are fun, and it's more or less you get to see some wrestlers that you might not know, and you can look into their body of work, because these are all some really talented guys I try to feature on my series. So yeah, look it up. It's a fun little. The videos no more than 2 minutes, 3 minutes a piece. So it's a little like a Jackass segment. It's like Johnny Knoxville, welcome to Jackass. It's, hi, I'm Cassidy Haynes, and this is me taking chops from pro wrestlers, and it's just them lighting me up. So yeah, check that out.
To be honest, guys, before we end this video, Cassidy, where can the good people find you?
Guys, go to bodyslam.net. That's my website. We do pro wrestling news, results, editorials. We got podcasts dropping daily on the site and on our YouTube channel. You can find me on Twitter at Casshole. It's CASSHOO. O's. So it's CASSHOOOLE, 3 O's. So it's like an extended version of that. But yeah, Casshole with 3 O's. You can find me on that anywhere, man. On social media, just search that username. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the same thing. And bodyslam.net. Just find us on social media there too. That's bodyslam.net on everything, man. And look us up on YouTube. We got tons of good stuff on our YouTube channel. Podcast dropping daily. Web series that are a little bit different, like me taking chops. We got one of my buddy's daughter. She's 6, and she does like a wrestling with Lucy, where it's just her going to wrestling shows and teaching you about what you need to know about wrestling.
Wow.
It's the cutest thing in the world, dude. She's a star. She actually got brought into the ring at Rampage the night before Full Gear, and they sent us the video for that. So if you go look that up, there's a whole Lucy getting brought in by Orange Cassidy. So we got some good stuff on the YouTube. It's not just like wrestling podcast, and we do MMA stuff and lots of good interviews, man. We got just go check it out. Go check out our YouTube channel. I think you'll have a lot of good stuff for a bunch of people, man. And I really appreciate you having me on, man. I love talking to you today, man. Let's do this again, man. I can talk all day, and I really enjoyed hanging out with you today.
We will try and do it a bit earlier next time, just so that I don't feel as rushed. Definitely.
That's fine, man. It's kind of on me, man. You got me at a busy week because, like I said, I'm flying out at 5 a.m. to go do GCW for the week, and I did 6 interviews yesterday for GCW guys. Ooh. So I've been like all week long just cranking out interviews. So this is my fault this week about being so hard to schedule. I've been just super busy, but next time we'll make it a little bit easier for you, brother. I promise.
Yep. But obviously, guys, if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish. Help the channel grow. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and find me on Twitter at Tom Talks Rubbish. Everywhere else you find your YouTube videos at Tom Talks Rubbish, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
You guys.